climate change and infectious diseases. The past 10 years, climate change has been an important topic. Infectious diseases have been affected by climate change. Predicting the outcome of climate change on these diseases is difficult. One challenge is accurately capturing the contributions of hosts, pathogens, and vectors. Another challenge is finding the climate response to bacteria, viruses, and fungus.
Okay, so the ecophysiology of host-pathogen interaction. So a host-pathogen relationship is when pathogens live by using the host resources and they live inside the host and their cells. Pathogens are things that cause disease in hosts, so therefore they are bad for the host. Ecophysiology is trying to determine how the behavior, development, and mortality of the host and pathogens are affected by outside climate and climatic variables such as temperature. So, for example, the effects of warmer temperatures increase immune enzyme activity and bacterial resistance, but it can also decrease the host immunity, which means that diseases would make it, there would be more diseases, and warmer temperatures lead to more diseases, for example, in the Caribbean. Okay, so the model used to predict the effects of climate and global warming with disease and epidemiology is the metabolic theory of ecology. And so this uses metabolism, temperature, and body size of the different hosts to predict responses to climatic and global warming. It is not species specific, and this can help predict the reproduction numbers and mortality of pathogens and parasites. And this model also talks about the trade offs with different populations and how this can affect their population numbers and their mortality of the species.
Community ecology has been affected by climate change by either reducing the risk of disease or further spreading disease. Talked about when Caribbean water temperatures rise, it can cause a growth of a new pathogen that can cause coral death, which can lead to the destruction of their entire ecosystem. Additionally, it talked about how keystone species in an ecosystem or an environment can be affected by climate change, and therefore it can lead to the affection of the entire food chain and the destruction of the entire food chain. Additionally, it talks about microbial communities and how commensal microbes feed off their other organism they're attached to. However, they don't hurt the organism, but they don't help the organism either, and this can shift to a harmful relationship because of climate change. While modalistic microbes and the organism they're attached to are both benefiting from their relationship, this can also change, and the microbe can become a pathogen to the organism because of climate change. Furthermore, it talks about how biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity can affect the entire ecosystem because one species having no diversity within the species and getting a disease can kill off that entire species, which would then trickle down and infect the entire ecosystem and their food chain.
So the next couple of things described in this article include phenology. Some of those phenomena include the cycle of a blueberry, so blooming, and migration. Now, as I talk about migration, I'm going to shift to species migration and some of the trends that are being seen as climate warming is occurring. Those trends can be seen in detail on the screen. So because there are new migrational trends due to climate warming, it is likely that there is an increase in infectious disease. This is because with the warming of the climate, parasites are able to hatch earlier, as well as gain exposure to their hosts earlier in the season.
One of the big questions we have to ask is how has climate change impacted different species? And a couple ways that it has done this is by melting the polar ice caps, which have limited habitats for species such as polar bears and penguins, and it also disrupts delicate ecosystems. And an example of this would be coral reefs. It has actually caused a third of all reef systems across the globe to be threatened by humans. Because of climate change, we as a human population have an increased risk for disease. A couple of these ways is increased rainfall, which leads to contaminated water, and also warmer and longer summers, which exacerbates certain disease-carrying organisms, such as Vibrio and mosquitoes. And these are only a few examples, but there are many, many more.
In regards to outlook and future changes, there are a lot of things that we can look at, starting with mechanic models and drivers. We already have a lot of the tools necessary to chart temperature and climate change and how pathogens can respond to temperature. So we would start with this, and these can later be applied to specific pathogen groups. And after temperature is mapped, we can apply these techniques to other climate change factors such as humidity. Little is known about how climate change affects a host pathogen evolution. Every pathogen is different, and it's easier to detect among specific systems. However, certain pathogens are extremely mobile, therefore a lot of research needs to be done in this field. Once we are able to complete those first two things via research, the next aspect of research would be researching other implications of climate change and pathogens, such as the effect on healthy arable land. So the next obstacle would be to identify vulnerable areas and how they would respond to different pathogens and what health threats these would create.